A lot of the large groups, the large private equity backed groups, are forming partnerships with hospital systems. That's so that they can get the hospital's higher rate. And if you can do it, it's a great business deal.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Today we have Steven Allred on the show, physical therapist, has his MBA, executive coach. He's done a lot in different practices, different settings. We're going to get into that. And currently he is one of the coaches with Jamie Schreier's Practice Freedom U. Steve, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome. So we had kind of like a pre-interview intro call the other night, and we talked about a lot of topics. I was kind of like reflecting back on, we even got into like the in-network and out-of-network, and that's maybe not exactly what we're going to get into today. But the one thing that you and I were riffing on and chatting about was a little bit of what you're currently helping practice owners with in terms of like how they want to grow and with their roles and responsibilities. We'll get into all of that. Anything else just in terms of like your background, your bio that can kind of catch the audience up of kind of like who you are and where you've come from, and then we'll kind of get into the topic.
Yeah, I've spent the last 12 years working with private practice owners, partly as a coach, and then also I led the development and growth of a network preferred therapy providers, and spent a lot of time talking to practice owners, talking to payers, and understanding that whole relationship. And I think it's been informative as I'm working with practice owners now of how are they going to grow a business to where it gives them what they hoped for, what they wanted, and maybe originally what they had planned on, but are having difficulty achieving.
Right. So why go into coaching? Why jump into that with Practice Freedom U?
I probably started back early in my career. And I graduated back history, and where I was in Seattle, been an awesome career. But the thing I lacked, Dave, is I lacked perspective, clarity, and maybe somebody who could have said, "Hey, think about it this way." And who knows how that might have made decisions. And come full circle, it's been about helping practice owners be better owners, better leaders, build stronger practices, and really help private practice thrive, because man, it's tough out there these days. Tough to eke out a living and a profit, and hiring and dealing with all the reductions. So it's really helping those owners find a different perspective and find a way to grow and achieve their goals.
For sure. So let's get into a little bit more of owners. They're wearing a lot of different hats. They're a clinician, they're treating patients 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, whatever it might be. They're the owner or the operator. As Sturdy McKee, who also does coaching, Sturdy will say the practice owner is like the chief bottle washer, as like a restaurant analogy, that a restaurant owner literally does everything. So what would be like an initial starting point in terms of helping practice owners maybe either get some clarity around their situation, or giving them some assistance in regards to how to navigate out of this situation of maybe wearing too many hats? Maybe they're not delegating. Maybe they don't have a clear plan. They don't have accountability. Maybe. I mean, what would be a good starting point for all that?
It's a great place to start, is just understanding the roles that they are playing. You mentioned it. They're treating patients. That's one hat. They're running the day-to-day operations of their practice. That's another hat. And then you have the owner hat, which is making decisions about where to invest money, how to achieve the profitability. How am I going to navigate the challenges I see coming? That's another hat. Unfortunately, that's probably the hat that they wear the least, because if you're treating 30, 40 hours a week, trying to manage just the day-to-day administration, there's not a whole lot of time and energy left. And so it's figuring out where you are in the life cycle of your business. Look, let's be real. If you're just started out, you've got one, maybe two therapists working for you. Stepping out of your business is really not an option. You just don't have revenue to hire people. So it's understanding the stage of the business you're in, and then building upon that so that you can, one, have enough revenue to pay yourself, plus hire the team underneath you to run the business. And it's building the stages and the building blocks along the way. That's really the key thing I find. If you try and do it too soon, you have no profits. If you stay in that mode of, I'm going to be the grinder that sees 40 hours a week treating patients, 7-figure practice, and you want to stay in it, it's eventually it's going to burn you out. And I've worked with those owners. And interestingly enough, getting them out of their practice, it rejuvenates the energy for the business, and they find new ways to grow their practice.
Right. And one thing
So the big thing is just understanding where you are moving. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. There was a little lag in the connection, so we talked over each other. My apologies.
I just was saying that it's really understanding where you are and what stage and what pieces you need to be working on in that stage.
Right. Right. And one other thing that we're going to talk about is kind of building a management team. But if you don't have enough profits, if you don't have enough extra cash to actually hire those folks or to allocate to those salaries or the skill set of those individuals, you need the clinicians to be producing X amount of revenue per clinician as part of a normal practice,
Right.
normal business model. But if you don't have the additional profits and scale and growth and that whole plan and that whole execution of it, then it's hard to actually have a management team, or maybe start at lower stages by delegating and having, like, admins do certain things, maybe an assistant or an executive assistant or administrative assistant do other roles and responsibilities to take things off of the owner's plate. But to have a management team, that means, doesn't it mean a certain amount of scale, like maybe $1 million in revenue or more, or a certain amount of scale?
They now have enough to start hiring. They've got the office manager, they've got the front desk team, maybe they've got a biller or they've got a billing company that they're working with. Now they can start thinking about hiring that director that takes day-to-day operations, combining it with your office manager so they can run the clinic. And that way, if the owner's not there, everything's running smooth. And, below that, you're really from about maybe 400 or 500 up to 800, $1 million. You're really building your processes, because as an owner, you're building a system. You build a system, people run the system runs the business. So you're building that, your day-to-day policies, procedures, your SOPs. And then you get into that $1.5 million range and you start thinking about, okay, I want to build a management team that can run the practice while I'm out, looking for new opportunities, relationship, and a vacation, heaven forbid. And you're developing, and now you've switched from owner operator to owner leader. And that's a tough transition. There's a lot going on to do that, just in the business, but also in an owner's identity. Feeling guilty about, I'm not at the practice. What are people thinking about me? These are all things that I've dealt with as far as owners go, that go beyond just the mechanics of hiring people and training them.
Right.
So it's part of the transition.
And obviously you guys help with, and again, so I have Sturdy McKee as my business coach. I've known Jamie Schreier for almost 10 years. So whether you go with Sturdy, you go with Steve, you go with Jamie, someone at Jamie's company, because I don't want it to be biased, like we're pitching coaching or something like that. But I saw something on a YouTube video the other day, and it was like, it said, wouldn't it be weird if you met an Olympian, someone in the Olympics that didn't have a coach? And so I thought it was a little funny, a little tongue in cheek. Now, obviously it was someone who was pitching or selling coaching, but it seems like it would make sense for any of these big transitional times for a business owner, for a practice owner. If they haven't been there, if they don't have a close colleague or a friend that has kind of navigated that transition, it certainly makes a lot of sense to have either a coach that's going to give you a game plan and some structure, or help with accountability or implementing some of the steps of that transition. I don't know.
Absolutely. Like I said, if you go back early in my career, had I had somebody at the crossroads of making some decisions, would my career have turned out differently? Absolutely. Because I lacked perspective and I lacked the game plan. So when I'm working with a practice owner and I've got some very successful practice owners that they're dealing with day-to-day problems, they're dealing with strategic decisions, and it's an opportunity to think through, to gain a different perspective that really changes the way they decide and how they lead through their practice. It might be mechanics, it might be the game plan, Or it could be, hey, I had this situation and I navigated it this way. Help me see it differently. And so we talk through it. And then they come out of that conversation looking completely different about leadership and how they're now developing their leadership team and what are their values and behaviors that they expect. So it's about gaining perspective and thinking through and having strategy that makes a bigger impact on the business. That's what it's really all about.
So in terms of this conversation for a practice owner, what would be like the next logical step for this situation? Is it clarity around the next decision? Is it asking around for which type of help, where to go? What would be a good tip or next logical step for someone kind of navigating this situation?
Kind of navigating, looking at a coach. We've got some, just even on our website, Practice Freedom U, we've got some great content of how to look at and what to look for in coaching. Coaching is a really broad term, and a lot of people are throwing it out in different ways. And so we've put together some material that helps clarify what coaching is and how to use it. We've got a quiz on our website that's a great place to go and say, okay, would it make sense for me to look at coaching? And, go through that, and it helps give you some clarity. And if you need to talk with them and be pretty straightforward with it, but it's looking at and saying, okay, what are my goals? I think the first thing is in saying, do I have a goal for growth and change? If you're just going to stay the same, I don't know that coaching is really going to make a huge difference. You don't need a coach to stay the same. I sit down with potential clients, and it's looking at how big are your goals. The bigger the goals, the greater the opportunity to make an impact and change. And then we talk about what's meaningful to them and map out a plan of how to accomplish what their goals are. And then it's the accountability to execution, because we can have a great strategy, but no execution, nothing's happening.
Right. Let's jump over to numbers and financials. I know a lot of physical therapists, a lot of practice owners, maybe they didn't have any accounting or big financial or math type of classes in undergrad, or definitely none in graduate school. And a lot of therapists kind of either stumble into opening up their own practice, opening up their own shingle. They leave the hospital job or some other outpatient job they believe and they think that they can do it better. And turns out they usually can, or they want to do their own thing, whatever it might be. But there's a ton of practice owners that you and I kind of discussed before. I mean, just grossly across the country, that just don't know their numbers, don't know their financials. Obviously, it can be harmful. It could cause stress and overwhelm around like payroll issues or tax season or whatever it might be. What are your thoughts around practice owners and financials and needing to know their numbers or the lack thereof?
Imagine I went in to treat a patient and I did no objective measures, took no vital signs, no range of motion, no strength testing, no baseline of anything. I just went in and started doing something. I look at it almost the same way. Your business is your patient, and your numbers are the data coming back to tell you how is it with your FTE count? What are your goals around it, expectations? What is the capacity of your clinic? If you've got a 2,500 square foot clinic, you have a certain capacity that's different than a 4,000 square foot clinic. So understanding that and what the opportunity is, that helps guide what your revenue growth is going to be. Understanding what levers to pull, in your business. If, oftentimes there's the ratio of three times, meaning for whatever you pay your therapist, they should be generating 3 times in revenue. That's really just getting at, after I pay my therapist, do I have enough money to pay for my operations, my non-productive stuff, my overhead, and still actually have a profit? If you're paying too much on your therapist, there's not a lot left, or you're going to have to be really, really skinny on your overhead. I think right now a big thing is thinking about what's called working capital. How much money do you have in the bank that if cash flow stopped today, how long could you go? How long could you pay payroll? A general rule that I have heard a lot of accountants use is about 3 months. I've worked with some owners that they have calculated they had less than half a month saved up. And with what's going on with Optum right now and not being able to submit claims, it's a big issue. People are panicking. So understanding your numbers, particularly your financials, is a big deal because it helps you know how to make decisions and also, or to say, hey, can I invest in that new clinic? Then how many patients do I need to see before I break even? All of those things are informative about how you decide so you don't do it in a panic, stressed out, and losing sleep every night. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of practice owners are because they don't understand those financials and their metrics.
And I mean, the practice owners kind of end up that way because they start their own practice and they're they own 100%. If they went solo, they don't always have partners. I know there's other practices that have scaled that have had 2 or 3 partners total, where that sometimes can be good, sometimes can be bad, but there's some oversight or there's some collaboration there. But when they're solo practice owners, there's no there's no checks and balances.
Right. That's a great point. You're out there by yourself. And unfortunately, we get stuck in our heads. We stick our heads in the sand. There's nobody to talk through and say, okay, hey, what do you think about this? Do I have blind spots? Can I look at this a different way? And I think that's a great place where coaching comes in so that you're not alone and you have the perspective that you need to be able to look at it. I was talking to an owner that in his market, a lot of the large groups, the large private equity backed groups are forming partnerships with hospital systems. That's so that they can get the hospitals higher rate. And it's a great business. I mean, if you can do it, it's a great business deal. And what they're doing is now it allows them to pay students or new grads really what they would like to be paid so they can pay off those huge, school loans. But it's killing all of these other smaller practices who can't tap into that. And our conversation was really more of a kind of a doomsday of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So we just broke that down and dissected what really was happening. Where was this owner positioned with his business, the financials, the growth, the scale, what he had in place, all of the assets he had. And by the end of the conversation, it was no longer this, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? It was, wait a minute, there's a great opportunity here because I'm a strong practice. And unfortunately, there are practices closing. How can he bring his practice forward as a great place to work? And it's now informed his strategic direction and decisions just by looking at it, reframing it, and seeing the problem for what it was as an opportunity and not necessarily the threat. Yeah. You don't get that if you're doing it by yourself.
Right. And it took me years to, I did a ton of things solo, have a mobile concierge practice here in New York City. And then probably maybe a year and a half now of having a business coach and 3 times a month, carved on the calendar, hour and a half each call, Zoom call, 100% dialed in. I've never missed one. I've only been, maybe a few minutes late here or there, but we always do it. We don't, if we need to reschedule it, we slide it, but we make it happen. And again, not really pitching anyone's coaching. And I don't do any coaching. We're trying to partner with practices, but it certainly helps with the clarity of the vision, the plan, all that. And my business coach, Sturdy McKee, says, 80 to 90% of businesses are the same. There's, marketing and there's, sales and financials and operations and the accounting piece. And then there's the last 10 or 20% that's the specific, physical therapy or plumbing or HVAC or whatever the business might be.
Yeah. There are business principles. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a small business. We got to apply business principles. And you do that effectively, and you're going to succeed. There are tweaks and there are things that are unique to our profession, certainly. And I agree with that. I've run small business. I've worked in large corporations that were heavily data and metric driven. I've worked in outpatient, skilled nursing. And that's the one thing that taught me is that they're just core business principles. And how do you adapt them to our industry? That's really what it comes down to is adaptation and using those in the best way and seeing it for what it is. Um, as the as owners, if we can do that, then we're going to build better, stronger practices that thrive and are not just at the mercy of what's happening around us. Um, and so, one of the best lessons I had probably in one of my corporate jobs was we were doing a quarterly business review. This was in a home healthcare company, and the CEO started looking at the metrics, and he turned to the branch operator and the regional people and said, "Your branch has these problems in these positions, and here's what's going on." And I looked at him, and he understood the business processes and the data and the metrics behind it that measured it to where he could say, this is what you need to do. He wasn't managing to a metric, but he was using the metrics to figure out what was going on and where the problems were. And so that's the power of, knowing your numbers and knowing your metrics so you can figure out what's going on. How do I improve it? Where can we be better? And apply just
or where the bottleneck is. I think Jamie Schreier likes to use the word bottleneck, doesn't he? They'll always say that.
Yeah, where bottlenecks, money, where you leaking money, where there's opportunity to shore up, and there's a lot. I mean, look at billing. I've talked to some owners where they're collecting 85 to 90% of what the allowed amount is. That's 10% of the dollars that you have already earned. You've already done the work, but you're not collecting it because maybe your process isn't good. Maybe your accountability isn't as strong, or maybe you don't have a management system put in place to help you catch that. And it's like, that's just money that goes to the bottom line because you don't have to do anything. You've already done the work. So yeah, it's finding those bottlenecks and leakages to where, there's more money there than you realize in your business if we run it well and run it tight and understand what's going on. That's the critical part.
Right. How about we'll circle back to, you gave an example of like a private practice owner that's independent that can't compete with a hospital affiliated or a private equity backed that then affiliates with a hospital that can charge, 3x, they get 3x the amount of Medicare rates or whatever it might be. So independent practice owner,
right.
They have maybe smaller margins. It's hard for them to attract a DPT or a therapist that wants, 90 or 100K or more or whatever. Have you seen any, like, without mentioning clients' names, like, have you seen clinics or practice owners or certain clinics do more things with cash pay, out of pocket things that are cash pay services, or they're expanding into out of pocket services that are like not medically necessary, that are kind of like, whether it's massage or personal training or any other modalities that maybe are not like don't have a CPT code or whatever it might be? Have you seen any practices that have expanded that way while remaining independent and on their own?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you're asking that question, I was thinking one of the practices that I work with, they have some great cash-based business. One, people who are coming in and paying cash for the services. They've got different programs, and whether it's dry needling or some other service that isn't typically billable in terms of the insurance company. So they're doing that. And, they've got processes in place at the front desk to help people understand the value and sell those services. And they track those, they break it down. They know how many insurance patients they have. They know how many cash-based and what the different services are. And it's affecting their bottom line. I mean, it affects their rate per visit, and that allows them to pay a bit more. I think the one thing, though, that owners perhaps miss out on is really understanding who are they and what they have to offer. In the same clinic, they were hiring a new grad, and they just flat out said, look, we can't pay the top dollar. If you're just about the money, then go to this clinic. I mean, they just up front just set it out, put it on the table, pulled it out and said, if the only thing you're interested in is money, go to this clinic here. They will pay you more. We are here to build master clinicians.
Mm,
And they could back that up. And so they doubled down on that unapologetically and say, we are building master clinicians. Is that who you are? Is that what you want? And the new grad was absolutely. He said, great, let's sign you up. And they hired that therapist. And they didn't pay top dollar, but they knew who they were, what they offered, and what they were about, and they were unapologetic about it. And I think, you can go in and if somebody's paying you top dollar, the math and the economics still have to play out. And either it's, maybe they do get that $300 a visit because they're partnered with a hospital. Okay. But if it's, another clinic, you're going to be seeing a high volume of patients because you got to pay. You got to pay for your salary. You got to pay for that cost, and the business still has to make a profit. So really understanding who you are and double down and don't be apologetic about what you're doing. And then, that also leads to really identifying who your clientele are that value the service and are willing to pay for it. And you can, and there's some great businesses. We have one of our coaches, Zach, he's got $1 million cash-based business that is very successful, but there are others that are successfully merging, insurance-based, out-of-network, and cash-based. And it's all mixing together to give them, just that edge on profitability after being able to recruit and retain people. So it's possible. They're doing it. And it's great to see.
that's awesome. That's great. Any final thoughts or recap?
It's a tough time to be an owner, but it's a great time to be a great owner because I'm seeing businesses grow. I'm seeing them be profitable, successful, happy. I think of one client that for the longest time, he thought he had to grind away. He had to be seeing more patients than anybody else in his practice. It took him a while to really wrap his head around being able to step back and let his team drive day to day. He stepped out. His team is happier. He's happier. He's more engaged, more creative in the solutions he's coming up with, finding growth opportunities. By the way, he's still making just as much as more as he was before. So there is light. It is possible. It's just putting those business principles to good use.
Perfect. That's awesome. Great place to pause, Steve. What's a good place, whether it's LinkedIn, email address, website, what's a good place for the audience to reach out to you just to connect or learn more about how you can potentially help them or just have like an intro phone call and touch base with you?
Yeah. Great question. I have a practice quiz that I can give you a link for that for the show that they can click on, and it'll take them to it and helps them understand is coaching good for me and where do I stand? And that's at our practicefreedomu.com website. And if anybody wants to just reach out directly, just email me at steve@practicefreedomu.com. I'm happy to take any kind of call or any kind of email or call and questions. And just if I can provide some help, whether we work together or not, then that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks for your time.
Dave, thank you. Have a great day.
Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE@CONCIERGE painrelief.com, or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.